and call the meeting to order. First item on our agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone in Zoom land, Stephen, who is awaiting public comment?
We haven't received any notification of anyone, but if there's anyone in the attendees that would like to provide a comment to the committee, you can raise your hand now. We'll give just a second for that. I'm not seeing any hands.
All right. We'll move on to item number 2, introductions, roll call. Do we have any alternates attending today in place of someone?
We do have ODOT. Stephanie, our regular non-voting member, is unavailable today. So Lewis, and I've forgotten Lewis's last name, is joining us.
ODOT Region 1 Senior Transportation Planner for today.
Okay. Welcome.
Thanks, Lewis.
Thank you.
Appreciate being here.
Anyone else? All right. If not, then can you go ahead and call the roll, please?
I will do that. For Banks, Mayor Jones.
Here.
Thank you. I know Mayor Beatty is on. She's just listening right now, but we confirmed she's there. For Cornelius, Mayor Delane.
Present.
Thank you. Let's see, Durham, Mayor Jenke. Don't think it's on yet. We'll keep an eye out. For Forest Grove, Mayor Wenzel. Just yet, okay. Hillsborough, Mayor Callaway. You. For King City, Mayor Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. North Plains, Mayor Linehan.
Present.
Thank you. For Sherwood, Mayor Rosner.
He's going to be a few minutes late, he told me.
Great, thank you. We'll keep an eye out. City of Tigard, Mayor Loop.
Here.
Thank you. For Tualatin, Mayor Bubenik.
I'm here.
All right. Wilsonville, Mayor Fitzgerald.
Present.
And Commissioner Fye for Washington County. Oh, we didn't hear you.
Present.
Ah, okay.
Can you
Thank
hear
you.
me?
Yeah, maybe just a lag. Thanks.
Yeah, present.
All right. For our non-voting members, I see Councilor Rosenthal from Metro. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
We mentioned ODOT earlier. Lewis Kelly sitting in for Stephanie Turner today.
Yeah, here.
Doesn't look like we have a port rep. And oh, I see John Sarah's in the attendees. If we can get him promoted up for TriMet. And I think that completes the roll call.
All right, thank you. That brings us to item 3A, consideration of our meeting minutes for July 15th. Did anyone have a chance to look them over? Any changes needed? See none. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve our meeting minutes from July 15th. All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Raise your hands. Opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. All right. Item 3B, a TDT expenditure request from the City of Beaverton. Diami will lead us through this item. Welcome, Diami.
Great, thank you, Mayor. We have a request from the City of Beaverton for an TDT expenditure request of $7.8 million for 2 projects, including the memo detailing a project for Western Avenue. This is supporting a project that received previous approval for expenditure requests, as well as a Shoals Ferry Road project for some signal upgrades. And county staff have confirmed that both projects are eligible for the expenditure, and the WCCC TAC took action and recommended approval at their September 5th meeting.
Any questions for Diami? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the TDT expenditure request?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. I have a motion and a second to approve Beaverton's TDT expenditure request. Any discussions on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Request is approved. All right, item 3C, MSTIP large project match fund allocation for the city of Hillsborough. Leading this discussion will be Jessica. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Pels, LUT Policy Analyst with Washington County. And if you'll remember, you recommended approval of a large project match allocation, like a large project match fund, I guess, during the MSTIP 3F package. And that was a $30 million set aside to use as matching funds for large federal and state grants. To allow us to leverage more money to try and get these larger projects done. So City of Hillsborough is requesting a $750,000 MSTIP large project match fund expenditure to use as grant match for project development and design of the Southwest 185th Avenue max grade separated overcrossing. They are applying for the regional flexible fund allocation, the RFFA step 2. Actually, step 1 is the bond program. That's the new one that's being formulated right now. This will come before JPACT, all the bond proposals that may be funded through this step 1 bond. They're also applying to the Federal Rail Association Railroad Crossing Elimination Program. And so they're hoping to just try and leverage as many things as possible to get a grant and get this project going. So of course, this is sort of a small expenditure out of the large project match bucket, but we anticipate that if this is funded, this is just step 1 of the large project. And so next phase would be construction ask. And so there would be another expenditure request for that. This is our first large project match expenditure request. And so we have written it out in the policy to use the same procedure as the OP fund with the added step that it goes to the Board of County Commissioners for a final decision. So the WCCC TAC recommended approval of this request at their meeting on September 5th. We're asking your recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Commissioners will consider it at their meeting tomorrow.
All right. I saw Mayor Callaway took his mute off, so have anything to say, Mr. Callaway, Mayor Callaway? Not Mr.
Hey, Mr. Works, I move approval.
What surprise. All right. I have a motion approved. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the MSTIP large project match fund allocation request from the city of Hillsborough. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? It looks like it's approved. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks.
Brings us to items number 4 and item 4A, the Metro Chief Operating Officer recommendation for the 2024 growth management decision. 2 familiar faces, Aaron and Ted, will lead us through this discussion. Welcome, Aaron.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair, and all of their committee members. It's nice to see you again. Ted and I are here to share information about the Metro Chief Operating Officer and staff recommendation that was released just a couple weeks ago. We're going to give you kind of an overview of where we are in the urban growth management process. Although you've seen that calendar often, I'm going to go through it real quick again, and then I'll hand it over to Ted, who will go through the recommendations and share information with you. We'll stay for questions if we have time for that after. So let me move quickly so that we do have time. Let's go to the next slide. This is that familiar calendar. You'll be happy to sort of see the great progress that's been made. We've been visiting you for a while, and we've moved now into the orange section of this schedule. We're in the public policy discussion. MTAC will be meeting on Wednesday and forming their recommendation for MPAC, who will be meeting later in the month. So this is really kicking off the of making recommendations to the Metro Council about this very, very important regional decision. As you know, that the decision needs to be made about whether the boundary will be expanded or not by December of 2024. 4. So we're shooting for that decision-making schedule. And if you look at the next slide, please, you'll get a little bit more detail about some of the important committees that are weighing in on this. Now go ahead and change the next slide. One of them I've mentioned too is MTAC and MPAC. Obviously, Metro Council is the final decision maker. So here are some more details on specific meetings. I know I don't have all the dates in here, but I'm happy to provide those specific dates where we have them confirmed. Another group that's weighing in on this is Metro's Committee on Racial Equity. They're also meeting this week to formulate their recommendations to the Metro Council that they will share this month as well. The public hearing for the Metro Council is at the end of this month. It's the day after the MPAC meeting. MPAC is on September 25th, and the council is on September 26th. So that public hearing is a really great opportunity for you and all of your constituents to have their voices heard at a Metro Council meeting on this very, very important topic. MPAC and MTAC, of course, also have public comment opportunities during those meetings. So you can let people know about that as well. MPAC is the evening of September 25th. And I believe that meeting is in person at Metro's offices. So I noticed that I've lost my slides. So you're all just looking at my face. And I can't remember what the next slide is. I think it is about our public comment period. So let me see what I can remember. We had a 45-day public comment period when the urban growth report was released. For anyone that doesn't remember what that is, the urban growth report is a summary of the data that has been collected over a year of time in preparation for this decision. It is the formula that our council must use in making their decision about whether to expand the growth boundary or not. So that public comment period occurred primarily during the month of July and beginning of August. We got something like 300 and something comments through our comment form. A large majority of those folks who commented on the comment form are from Sherwood, which is also just reflective of where we did a lot of sharing of information and encouraging folks to participate. We did, we had signs at the library, we had information available in Spanish and in English so people could participate in that survey. So whenever you get a chance, whoever's running the slides, you can move to the one that has a long list of topics on it. I think it's like slide 4. And so we heard great, just in time. So I'm glad I didn't have to memorize this because as you can see, we heard a lot of different things. And it was even hard to summarize it on one slide, but we heard a variety of comments related to wanting really to have a lot of optimism in our reporting about the future growth potential of our region. I think a lot of this comes from a desire to see us form policy that encourages both growth in our jobs regionally and also in bringing people to the community and encouraging people who are here to stay and not to leave our community. So a lot of interest in that and thinking about the long-term potential of our region as a great place to live. We heard the importance of home ownership and home ownership opportunities, as well as job opportunities in Sherwood. In general, folks want to see more housing choices, in particular for seniors and young families. And we heard about concern about there being enough affordable housing in the region for folks in those different groups, but also others that need affordable housing. We heard some concerns about what kind of impacts this growth could happen if it occurred in Sherwood, worries about traffic, increased traffic, impacts to farm and agricultural activities, worries about impact on the environment generally and climate change, costs of infrastructure, et cetera. These are kind of expected and normal comments and worries about when we have urban expansion and important things to be talking about. And we also heard some comments kind of on both sides of whether the boundary should be expanded or not, with concerns about using land effectively within the UGB, as well as these needs for optimism and growth. So a lot of different comments, and there's a great public comment summary report that is available online and also in MPAC's previous meeting packet. So I can help you find that if you would like to dig into it more. Next slide, I think, is where I'm going to hand it over to Ted to talk about the actual recommendation in the staff report.
See, Mayor Rosner's hands is up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, before you move on from the surveys, just maybe a suggestion for the next round is there been any thought to doing a more scientific survey as opposed to something that can get email around and abused by groups that want, things to favor them, that actually doing, hiring a firm and doing a real scientific study to make sure it really reflects what the community's thinking?
There has been discussion of that before. I think it's a good recommendation and something to talk about, and make sure that it gets into the budgeting when we put this in place in the future. I will say that inevitably conversations about an expansion become specific to that area. We've seen this over the many years. The folks who tend to be the most interested in an UGB decision are either those who are affiliated with specific interest groups, and or those who are opposed or in favor in the community where the expansion is intended to happen. So I think that just makes a lot of sense, right? That's very natural to the decision itself, and probably a factor that no matter how we measured, we might find that to play out. But I think very open to talking about how we do engagement in the future. And so, yeah, let's talk about that in 5 years.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Appreciate it. The interest groups can sometimes overwhelm that. That's my concern. So thank you.
You're absolutely right. That is a factor. Yeah. So is Ted here? I'm a little concerned that he's not.
Stephen, you see, is Ted? Maybe he's not
I'll just
as a panelist.
No, we don't have Ted in the attendees, and I apologize, Chair.
Okay.
I think we had a snafu with our script, so we're actually a little bit out of order. So Ted may have been anticipating joining a little bit later.
Okay, well, I'll just keep going. I'm pretty smart about these things too. Hopefully I can answer all of your questions. All right, so essentially I'm going to talk then about what the COO recommendation actually says. It identifies a deficit of homes, and this is not a deficit. This is, when I say deficit, what I mean is a difference between the growth, and a difference between what can be accommodated inside the growth boundary. So we found that quite a bit of future growth can be accommodated within the existing land inside the urban growth boundary, both with development on vacant land, but also redevelopment. It's important to know that our region historically, about 2/3 of growth in housing happens with redevelopment inside the growth boundary. So having that taken out, we found a deficit, and that deficit is still in a range in the COO recommendation. And this range you can see on the slide here. So we do have a deficit of housing that needs to be accommodated somewhere. And this range is luckily quite close to what's available in Sherwood. And so it'll be a matter of narrowing and coming up with one number, and that we've given that to our council to make. So the recommendation itself just still has a range in terms of housing need. Next slide. So we're going to go on to industrial. You may remember from the last time that Ted and I were here that we talked about the need for large industrial sites. All the analysis that we did looking at potential growth of a variety of different industries in the Portland metropolitan area, and our capacity for accommodating that growth inside the growth boundary, we did find a lot of available vacant industrially zoned land inside the urban growth boundary, and enough to accommodate the growth that we anticipated. However, the existing capacity, the existing land that we have available for industrial growth is limited by both its size. We found that the average lot size of land inside the urban growth boundary is 3.8 acres, and the median is 1.7. So while those smaller sites provide an area of growth for certain industries, not all industries can accommodate such small lot sizes. Particularly semiconductor and high-tech manufacturing need larger sites. And one of the problems of having a lot of small sites like that is that they need to be, to make larger sites, you need to bring a bunch of those small sites together. And that can be expensive and challenging for the jurisdictions where that land is located. So the team here at Metro, our planners use the 2022 Oregon Semiconductor Task Force report to dig into this unique need for large industrial sites. And what we found, what that report said, is that statewide, there's a need for sites over 50 acres in size. And this is definitely a deficit that doesn't exist inside the urban growth boundary. So the report from our COO and from staff indicates that we have a need for these large industrial sites, and puts that at about 2 sites of over 50 acres or more. Next slide. So specifically, to get to the heart of the matter, what is the recommendation about the UGB? Go to the next slide, please. And the answer is that the COO and staff recommend to MPAC and to Metro Council to expand the UGB to include the Sherwood West Urban Reserve. That urban reserve has planned for enough housing to accommodate the need identified in our analysis, and also provides capacity for these large industrial sites that the region also needs. Next slide. If you've been involved in an urban growth boundary decision in the past, you know that Metro Council also puts conditions of approval on those expansions typically. So what the COO and staff recommendation does is shares some categories of what conditions we recommend that Metro Council consider. And here are those categories. So some minimum number of housing units that are required for Sherwood to plan for in their continuing planning for the West Sherwood expansion area. And the next set of planning that happens is comprehensive or community planning. This is the kind of planning that then it leads to zoning and all of the specifics that are required for development to happen. Metro always provides the funding for Sherwood to do that comprehensive planning. And so this would be a requirement of what needs to be planned for to make sure that that housing need that was found in the urban growth report can be accommodated in this expansion. Housing affordability has been a topic. I think I told you that was heard in public comment. It's also been something our council has talked about. So housing affordability is another category that the recommendation asks our Metro Council to think about. Another area is, as I talked about, the protection of large industrial sites. Since the need is for 50 acres or more, it's important that Sherwood plan for the protection of those large sites and not let them be subdivided into much smaller lots that would not serve the needs of that high-tech manufacturing. It's part of Metro's values to be expanding engagement beyond just those people who often choose to be participants in government activities. So we've asked Sherwood in this category to think about how they can broaden their engagement during the comprehensive and community planning phases. Again, Metro has funds to provide to help achieve that goal, as well as this last category, which is an area that I think all of us need to do a better job in, and that's tribal consultation. And so this again is a request, would be a requirement to ask Sherwood to do that in their next planning stages. And again, Metro is available to help and consult in doing that, since it's new activities that haven't been typical in the past. So those are the categories of conditions of approval that are included in the staff and COO recommendation. Next slide. Those ones were specific to Sherwood. So the COO recommendation also makes some recommendations on Metro. So similar to what Mayor Rosner commented about how Metro could do things differently in terms of our engagement in the future. Go ahead to the next slide. There are several recommendations from this report that talk about what we could do differently. This first one is actually in the urban growth report. It suggests that we make a change to how we calculated those industrial lands. We used a 25% slope in the urban growth report, and we've since gotten feedback from many people in this room that 25% slope is much too high for how industry makes its decisions about land where it can build. And so we've adjusted it down to 10%. And we're going to make this change in the final urban growth report using a 10% slope threshold for eliminating properties from the capacity list that have anything greater than a 10% slope. So we're going to do that. Next slide. More long-term, the COO recommendation directs Metro staff to begin work on an update to the 2040 growth concept and the region's future vision. That's some work that I'd be happy to come back and talk about more in the upcoming months when we start putting more details around that scope of work. Next slide. This asks staff to look at Title 11 and other ways that we can expand what is required of cities when doing their concept planning to include more equity assessments when they plan for new urban areas. So this wouldn't affect Sherwood, but would be something that we might put into place for the future. So we'll be looking into that possibility. Next slide. As well as consultation with tribes, because like I said, this is a really important issue. Metro needs to be doing a better job of how we engage with tribes on urban growth management issues, and this asks Metro staff to look at the opportunities for doing that, including how we incorporate tribal data and expertise and priorities in the urban growth report technical analysis. Next slide. So that's where I'll stop. I hope that gives you a good summary of what the COO and staff recommendation says. And now I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
All right. So we can see everybody again. All right, there we go. Questions for Erin? People are popping back here now. Quiet group today. I guess I'll start off. On the housing affordability part, that's a struggle I think all cities are having. How is Metro looking to help guide or help cities get affordable housing? The struggle, we all want to have workforce housing, but the issue is getting builders to build it. And how can we corral builders to build the kind of things that we know people want built versus more single family detached homes on a nice sized lot, to get the builders to build townhomes or condos, cottage clusters is a challenge. And even if some cities have gone the route of waiving SDC fees to get them built, and it still has not worked. So what's the strategy, especially if you're going to have Sherwood take this on? How is this going to be done?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that this is a big challenge, and all of us at the regional level, at the county, at the cities are all struggling with how to produce this housing. At the regional level, of course, we're having a regional conversation about how to expand available funds to our housing, affordable housing bond program. So I hope you've been getting some updates about that conversation that continues and is ongoing. That would certainly help, is to have more regional funding available to help subsidize the production of housing. What we're also hearing, I heard a lot of this conversation at MTAC. I am the MTAC chair, so this is where many of your staff participate in providing feedback. And there was a very dynamic conversation at their last meeting at the end of August about this recommendation. And we heard from the City of Beaverton talking about the same things that that you were, Chair, about the difficulties of just the limited abilities of cities to kind of have this impact because they don't have the funding to subsidize, and also struggle with the staff, funding for staff to do the work. And then we had a nonprofit affordable housing provider who is a member of MTAC, who was there at the table, who had a counterpoint and said, you know, all of those things are true. And us as nonprofit developers, we really need the city's support and the county's interest and support for what we're doing and invitations to participate in their community. And we want to work in partnership with cities. So I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, it's not a clear answer, but the fact that a nonprofit housing developer who are the kind of developers who make this kind of work happen need to know the degree to which their cities are area cities are supportive and want to work with them. But I also think that we have an opportunity to share, I hope, to share more information between cities within the metro region about what's working. Places like Milwaukee that own property that are working to develop them in partnership with the private sector to build the kind of housing that they want to see in their downtown area. But there's a lot of different approaches that cities are taking. There's no question that this is a challenge and that we need to band together to figure out how to do it right. And we're a partner. We're a partner at the table to try to help with that.
So when you're saying affordable housing, are you saying, is it permanently affordable housing or more, you know, market rate affordable housing? Which one are you after, both or one or the other?
Well, that's a question for our Metro Council, because ultimately they'll be the ones to decide what plays out in a condition. But from my perspective as a planner, we need it all.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with you. And like you're mentioning, you know, I think most of us have read the article in the Oregonian about the struggles Reach is having right now. You know, providing these kind of services just financially, that
it's all around.
Yeah, it's all around. Even, you know, the major permanently affordable folks like SEPA and Reach are struggling financially. You know, so the folks we rely on are struggling to get this housing out and maintain it. So I don't want to hog the conversation. Hands have popped up. Mayor Rosner, you're up first, followed by Mary Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Aaron, for coming in today to present all this. I'm going to go to the future again, or back to the future. Is there? Yeah, I think it's mentioned in the CO recommendation, but is there going to be like a robust discussion? It would be great to like get a group of mayors and interested parties together to talk about what is this going to look like for the next cycle. You know, what do we do differently? How do we make the process better? Yeah, you know, it's, you know, because for instance, we went through this whole concept plan and not knowing that there would be density questions, you know, to the level they've come up, right? So thinking about it in those terms, and also just thinking about it in terms of, you know, when you have, I just Googled this online, the vacancy rate for industrial lease space in the Portland market is less than 5%, but we have a report that shows massive availability of land. You've heard me say this before, but that's a massive disconnect. And it gets to, are we really doing the analysis correctly in terms of what the market can bear? And the same goes for housing. You know, are we the base assumptions underneath all that housing data, you know, how many units you can put on an acre and what are the likely outcomes? Are we really getting to the bottom of what that looks like? So maybe less of a question, more of a suggestion to have that process early before we get too close to the next cycle.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think it would be fantastic to get area mayors together and have a conversation about this UGB process and what to do differently next time. And I also agree that it should be this year or early next year and not 5 years from now, because we'll all forget. Right now is when we have that feedback about what has or hasn't worked. So let's keep talking and identify what the right forum is. If it's something Metro needs, an event Metro needs to create for that purpose, or if we can use an existing gathering to have that conversation. I love the idea and I'm very open to making that happen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go next, as you suggested. I wanted to just comment on some of the comments about how do cities get better or develop and implement first-time home buyer opportunities. And the city of Wilsonville thankfully got a grant from Metro, I believe, to conduct, yes, it was a Metro grant several years ago to conduct our equitable housing strategic plan. It was a really thorough study. It was finished in 2020. It has all these steps in it. We've done a number of the steps. The one that is still requiring a lot more work and actually more funding and staff is first-time homebuyer opportunities. So we've had meetings with Habitat for Humanity and also a really great one recently with Proud Ground. And then I had further meetings with our staff because I really want to push this forward. It's been one of our goals. And I just want to say that we're probably not the only place, and we're probably the same as everybody else, where our staff is really maxed out. And they said to really develop a great program where we have scattered proud ground opportunities throughout housing developments, we need to have a staff person who has that level of expertise. So if we just have cities compare notes and work together, I think that would be good, but I think it might be slow. And so I'd like to ask Metro to consider maybe there's a way to have an expert within Metro to help with that could then partner with city staff. Because what I'm hearing is until we get more planning staff in Wilsonville, they can't push forward very much on that new category of home ownership, which is so important because, as we all know, the rental rates just keep going up and they're often owned by out-of-state people. And our citizens wonder why we can't keep the rates low.
Yeah, that is great information. Thank you, first of all, for plugging our grant program. If anyone else in this room wants to pursue that kind of work that Wilsonville has, Metro's planning, 2040 planning and development grants are absolutely available for you to do that work. But that was not your point. Your point was that grants and planning only take you so far. Ultimately, you need staff who can implement it. And having that particular expertise can be expensive to hire full-time on your own staff. I really like this idea, Mayor, of having Metro potentially, I think could potentially use 2040 planning and development grant funding to have a person available to consult. So I'm really, I think that's kind of a great idea. I'm happy to explore whether we could use that funding that way. And I would really like to get more information from your staff about exactly what kind of expertise is needed. And hear from others about how we might find the perfect person to serve in that role.
I'll have them get in contact with you. Thank you.
Great. It's a good idea.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but Aaron, Ted's online now. Would you like me to promote him up?
Sure.
We'll do that.
Because one of you is going to have a question I can't answer, I'm sure of it.
So Mayor Beatty's up next, and then Mayor Delin after that.
Sorry, I was trying to get my headphones back and step outside because my kid is napping. I think, sorry, I'm trying to frame my thought. First, I'm trying to frame my thoughts in a constructive way because I'm slightly offended at the fact that it's a suggestion that the cities from a nonprofit developer just lack creativity to do things. I think that's demonstrably false, and that all of our cities have been doing a lot of work around getting affordable housing. And so I think like I'd be happy to talk to any developer that wants to build in the city of Beaverton that can do it without subsidies from the city, because that's the problem. And so I also just kind of thinking about the presentation, you're interchanging the word suggestion and requirement for the same thing. And so if Metro is suggesting we do something versus requiring we do something, that's a very different thing. And if it's a requirement, it needs to come with money. Like the city of Beaverton, you heard from my staff, it's probably similar comments from me. We can't afford more affordable housing unless it comes with money. And the only solution isn't another affordable housing bond. Like the cities, our taxpayers, they can't we can't keep going back to the same pot of money and asking them to fund more affordable housing. The polling suggests they're not into it. So I think that we're doing the best we can, but the more unfunded mandates and requirements that come from Metro on top of cities is just going to make it so none of us want to expand the urban growth boundary.
All right, I guess, Jeff, you're up.
Wow. Mayor Beatty stole a bunch of my thunder. But I'll chime in again then, because we'll put that as two chads on the voting table. We've had some success in affordable housing development, right? Some actual non-tax paying affordable, right? 113 units, the 43 units above the library. We've been so successful, in fact, that we now have to have a moratorium against any further affordable housing development that doesn't pay some kind of taxes, because exactly what Mayor Beatty said is our citizens can't afford it. And I'm not sure that we've really done the balance across the entire region to look at what is each city's and the county's urban unincorporated responsibility, right? How much is a share, right? Is the almost 200 units that we've done recently, is that really our fair share? Is our homeless transition center our fair share? So I think we need to look a little bit about what's a fair share, right? Is it by, city size, square miles, whatever? What is everybody's fair share that we should be, to make sure that we're all supporting our communities? And I would say the other part is you can probably talk to our staff, because we were able to, we had the original land in the Southeast Cornelius that we developed. And I was just looking at that as you guys were talking. We have almost all the homes are on 3,000 square foot lots. And backed up against those freestanding 3,000 square foot homes are quadplex row homes, right? We have 4 homes in a row. So whatever our city manager and the development group was able to do with the developers, we were able to get some of the, I think to what Mayor Bubenik is talking about, more affordable housing, right? Some of it that falls below the cost per square foot of, a freestanding, what everybody in the surveys tells us, right? 80% of people want a freestanding independent home, but not everybody can afford that. It may not be the right end point for them, and it may not be the right starting point that they can afford. So I think looking at getting with our staff, looking at how we have managed to get the developers to make that good decision, right? And we had a development down there that was developing when others were stopping during COVID. They chose to focus on an area because they were making lots of sales. So I think there's an opportunity there. And I think to what you're talking about is getting the right people together to talk about what incentives are actually making a difference and are working, but also maybe talking about what do we think is a fair share of the burden for each of us to carry on truly affordable housing, the stuff that doesn't pay any taxes at all. Because I think the thing that people miss, and when we talk about a lot, is industrial land comes on at 100% of assessed value, residential like 50%, and apartments 30%. So they don't actually help bringing those on. They actually further deteriorate the taxing authority area's ability to fund police, fire, and basic services. So we were in this juxtaposition. So I do want to give a very loud shout out and yay though, that you guys recognized, and in Sherwood's recommendation is industrial land with housing, right? I think that's great because that gives you can't tell people where to live and work, but you can give them, the communities, an opportunity to try to create balance. And I think that almost should be the thing going forward, is if you bring in housing, you should bring in industrial, right? I used to be looking for industrial people. I'm out of industrial land. I've got nothing. I've been very successful at all the houses, but the little industrial area we had is completely blown out now. And I've got people knocking on the door for that 500 acres up north. And we haven't had an adult discussion about how are we going to bring the next industrial land into so many of our communities that are underserved, right? We are a bedroom community. There are a lot of bedroom communities. I think we need to go around and look at that as a characteristic. How do we make these communities better at self-sustaining? How do we help their tax base? If I could get the land, I could develop it right now to support industry, but can't get it. So I think that's something. So there's the attaboy, there's the challenges, and I think a recognition that our team has done some good stuff here. And I think we should talk about how we replicate that with other developers. And a big one, our developers all came in with a clear understanding. You own your infrastructure development, including $1 million pumping station that had to be put in as part of this development, because poop doesn't run uphill, it runs downhill. And they came in with full well and knowing that they had $1 million pumping station they had to put in to make the development work. So I think we also have to have the developers understand, you own those, right? The streets, the water, the sewer, all of that needs to be part of the package deal. We can't put that on the cities or the existing ratepayers to pay for that expansion. It needs to carry its own water in and out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Rosner, then Mayor Callaway.
Thanks for your comments, Jeff. That was spot on. You stole a little bit of what I was going to talk about. I would just add on the, we have HB 2003, where ultimately the state's going to come back and set housing production targets for all the cities based on income levels. So part of my concern with any conditions coming out of Metro is we don't get conflicting requirements, right? So we have to be very cognizant of the fact that the state is all over this right now. And in any affordability targets, I hate to use this word, needs to be more aspirational. We need to go out and plan. We need to culture an environment that makes it easier to for these projects to come into our cities. That doesn't mean setting hard targets where land is just going to sit there because you can't get people to come in to either donate the land or subsidize the projects for whatever it takes. I did want to add just, and by the way, Jeff, thank you for the plug on the fact that we're bringing in jobs land and housing land at the same time. I just wanted to riff on affordability for a second, because there's affordability in terms of housing choices, right? Because naturally a smaller house is going to cost less. That's just the math. And then there's subsidized housing. One of the things we're doing on the affordability side is, the governor's housing bill, HB 2001, was intended to generate more affordable housing. We're actually creating 2 specialty zoning types to force it: cottage cluster only and multifamily only, or middle housing only zoning types. And just with that, our plan has 43% of our housing units will be middle housing and above. So there's a lot of ways you can skin that cat, and I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that's kind of one of the ways that we're looking at it in Sherwood.
Mayor Kelly, you took your hand down. Okay. All right. Jeff, you still have yours up. Okay, it's gone. With that, what message, conveniently, Tim is Councilor Rosenthal, your hand just went up.
Yeah, at the risk of stepping into a potential quagmire here. I just thought I should comment. I think these comments have all been very interesting and very reasonable. As Mayor Rosner pointed out, there's a difference between deeply affordable housing and, as Mayor Fitzgerald pointed out, first time affordable housing. They're two different markets really in many ways. I just have to point out, I mean, I think the idea of getting together and trying to figure out what we can do, the cities, as Mayor Beatty pointed out, have a lot more experience in encouraging housing of various different sorts. If you remember, Metro didn't even really have a housing department 2 years ago. Where we have some expertise is in providing the money for, and not really always doing the development, because there's a lot of groups involved there, for deeply affordable housing, which is building new housing. So I think the idea that eventually we have about half as many deeply affordable houses as we need, the idea that we may have to find a way to get more money there is another issue. But I think, for, at least from my standpoint, I'm totally in line with having just some sort of forum where we talk about all the ideas that are possible, recognizing that, you know, Metro does not have a long history of expertise in the breadth of housing provision that the cities have. So just putting that out there, that, you know, it's going to be a cooperative effort as we move forward and try and develop a lot of housing, particularly, you know, as you know, there's this idea of we might have 1,500 acres of industrial land. Well, how do we provide the housing for this area? And where does it go? And how do we provide an appropriate range of all levels? So there's some big issues out there that I think we can work constructively on.
Right. Okay, so with that, any direction we'd like to give Mayor Rosner as our representative on the impact on suggestions from the coordinating committee on the COO's recommendation and how we feel about it, and or would we like to have staff draft a letter, you know, with our support of certain items in the COO's recommendation, or pointing out the things we don't like. So I'm just opening it to the floor on, you know, how would you like to proceed on this topic? Because with the public comment open, do we want to supply a letter, or we just have Tim pass on our thoughts?
And Frank, if I could add, there's
Sure.
So MPAC has a formal responsibility to make a recommendation to the council on the Sherwood Ask proposal, as well as the UGR. So that vote's coming up in our next meeting, which is on the 26th. So I definitely wanted to get guidance for that, because as Frank pointed out, I have two hats here. One, I'm representing all the mayors in Washington County. And then obviously I might be a little biased because we have an ask in right now. So I'm really interested in hearing your feedback on that. In the last MPAC meeting, there was a lot of conversation around a recommendation to just support the ask as Sherwood proposed, as opposed to any kind of additional you know, density upsizing or specific requirements. So that's where the conversation's been so far. But regardless of my bias, I'm more than happy to carry the vote and carry the message of what my fellow mayors want.
And Stephen, the coordinating committee already did send a letter in support of Sherwood's ask, correct? So we were signing that a couple of weeks ago or something?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Mayor Callaway.
So I think just as a point of clarification, Mayor Rosner represents the smaller cities of Washington County.
Thank you, Steve. That's correct.
Beaverton and Hillsborough just have standing seats. So, just wanted to throw that out. So we would actually have, 3 voices, on there, as opposed to just, the one.
Okay. So what's the temperament of the coordinating committee? Because we did send a letter in full support previously of Sherwood. Do we need to send another one? I think Tim's heard pretty much where we stand, that we're very supportive of Sherwood's ask. And that we did have questions about some of the requirements, like Mayor Beatty said. Is it a requirement or an ask? on some of these things. And then if it's a requirement, then money has to come with it. So your hands back up, Mr. Mayor Calloway.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think now that, we have kind of the final recommendation, I think we send a letter in that addresses the final recommendation, with kind of these new concerns. Metro doesn't sub-regionalize. And yet I'm concerned about some of the fact that if we're going to get into some of the more prescriptive things, it would be handled regionally, even though some parts of the region are farther along, than other parts, and yet it would apply theoretically equally across the board as it appears to me. So I would just say this is an opportunity to once again reinforce what we said before and bring up any new concerns or questions that we might have.
All right. So Stephen, you have the basics of what would you would need to draft a letter, or do you need a little bit more detail?
It might be helpful to think about any specific feedback. We've talked a lot about housing affordability. And so I think if there were some specificity that you'd like included in a specific comment back, that would be helpful for us.
I what rang for me was Jeff's comments about, divvying up the share, if you will, throughout the region. That it can't be all in one city or in a handful of cities. That kind of addresses his concerns and Mayor Beatty's concerns that to me, it's, some of the cities are bearing most of the weight, and it's not being distributed, if you will, throughout the region. So maybe a point about that. And then the points about, as Mayor Beatty said, about the cost of permanently affordable housing to cities is just getting unbearable. And while we all want more housing like that, it's just financially, it's tough to do now. Other ideas that we'd like to have in the letter? Mayor Rosner.
I think just as a general theme, you've all heard me say this before, we need partnership, not mandates. We need tools, not rules, if we're going to solve for this.
Okay. Other things we'd like to have included for the letter that Stephen and or Jessica will draft? I'm not hearing much more. You have enough, Stephen, or no?
Sorry, can I add one more point? I
Sure.
think one of the things that we've not really addressed is the industrial land aspect. And, cities that have industrial land gain more property. It's worth more. And so I don't know, I think this idea that if Portland has some, the rest of us don't need any, this kind of I understand that they're a regional government looking at the region, but property taxes aren't designed that way. We don't collect as a region and divvy it up. And so making sure that cities are allowed to protect what's there and it's their ability, and not to say there's some in Gresham, therefore Sherwood doesn't need any. That's a challenging, and that puts us in competition with each other rather than partnership.
It's a terrific point. Yep. Maybe Stephen to have his head back up there. He's done writing. Okay.
Sorry, yeah, taking some notes. Yeah, and I guess maybe on that point, I'm trying to think about what specifically would be the nature of the comment. Just a general concern or a sense that we don't want jurisdictions being put in a place of seeming to compete relative to industrial land.
Yeah, because it's not happening yet, but it will, right? And especially if they're only looking at I don't think looking at industrial land as a region under this property tax model makes sense. And while it's important to know that other cities have industrial land, but I have industrial land that's coming in from the UAA from the county, I intend to keep it that way. But if it's industrial land versus housing need, what wins out, right? Like I could throw a quarter and people would build housing there, no problem, market rate housing, but that's not Beaverton's need. Beaverton is doing its fair share in housing build. What we need is to protect industrial land that's coming in and not say that there's enough in other areas. And I'm not the only city that has this issue. It's for, coming for all of us. We heard a lot of it, when Sherwood was expanding and what they were talking about. So I think, I don't think just saying like local control is enough. These are some examples of where local control should be maintained because we understand our tax rolls. We understand the city's future financial needs and where we're at. Does that make sense?
It's also a transportation issue where if all this land that Metro is saying is available is out Troutdale Gresham, and that's where developers are pointed to, then the folks in our part of the metro area, that's a lot of driving. Here we are trying to discourage people from driving, making small trips, use transit. It's significantly a lot less commute if people in Tualatin have a job in Sherwood versus Gresham Troutdale. So we can get into that. If we want to get into the transportation, climate impact, all that good stuff of having to commute across the region for a job, because that's what industrial land is, versus in my own city where they could ride their bike or a scooter, that then we're reaching our climate goals.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I think we have something we can work with.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron and Ted, for joining us today.
Frank,
Yep.
I just want to make sure the one thing we haven't really touched on is density. Does this group have any comments on density? The Sherwood ask, for a full build, our ask basically says at full build out, our target's 9.2, knowing that there's density bonuses with HB 2001 and stuff like that. That's what we're asking Metro for. Metro, the CO recommendation had a range much higher than that. They're going from 9.2 to 16. My take is cities need to set that. We just went through an exhaustive process over the last 3 years with our community to get them to this point. And I'm just curious what this group thinks about that and where we should be, as the small city representative to MPAC, what should we be talking about?
Mayor Cowett and Mayor Lou, please.
Well, I just sort of see this as a Metro Sherwood thing. I don't feel it's any of Hillsborough's position to start telling Sherwood what their density needs to be. I sort of feel like I want to stay in my sandbox on this one.
Okay. Mayor Lou.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate that. But at the same time, we're in a housing crisis, and if we want to totally stand behind that and say that, like, I'm in favor in generally of higher density. River Terrace 2.0 is actually targeting 20 units an acre. And, we looked at sort of like the Pleasant Valley concept plan from 2003, which was 10.2 an acre. And if we're not doing better than 2003, I worry that we're just going to get completely into the same cycle. And I feel a little differently about like middle housing going into established neighborhoods when there's an open lot, because I hear all the time and I get yelled at all the time about cottage clusters and the density and it not fitting in. But when we're talking about brand new neighborhoods where it can be planned in a dense sort of way, and again, I live in a really dense neighborhood, I feel like if we want to talk about this truly being a housing crisis, then we need to be building the housing to do that. But I certainly respect Mayor Callaway's, this is a between Metro and Sherwood thing. This is just my personal feeling.
Okay. So it sounds like we're going to stay out of that discussion. We're appreciative of Sherwood's position, but we're going to stay out of that conversation for now.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I obviously have a bias.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask the question.
All right. Anything else on this? All right. Again, thank you, Aaron and Ted.
Thank you. And Chair, if I could, I do apologize. We inadvertently sent you a script with misordered agenda items. And so I want to thank our Metro folks for working on the fly to jump in there. And if we can now, I'd like to go to our item 4A actually, which is the state transportation package update.
Yep, that's what I have next.
Okay, thank you.
So this is gonna be led by Carly and Jim. Is Jim McCauley here?
We are getting them promoted now. Okay, so I've got Carly.
There's Carly.
Carly. Try Jim one more time. There we go.
There's Jim. Welcome. So who's leading off, Carly or Jim, on the transportation package update?
So did we flip a coin, Carly, or do you want me to...
That we did. I'll kick us off and then I'll turn to you, Jim. But Chair Bubenik, Mayors, it's really wonderful to join you here today. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Carly Silva Gabrielson with your Washington County Government Relations team. Have also my counterpart with LOC, Jim McCauley. We are going to do a little update on the 2025 state transportation package, provide an update on what's happening at the end of the month with the Joint Committee on Transportation Roadshow, and then turn to you for some conversation. Jim, I think I'll maybe kick it back over to you and then we can dig into the slides.
Yeah, no, that's super. Carly, appreciate the invite on this, and lots of familiar faces, obviously around the Hollywood Scores here. With my tenure in Washington County, I was in front of this group, I think, many times. So it's great to be here. I think probably the best thing to offer at this point in time is, for those of you not familiar, I'll just hit on really quick in terms of how the league goes through its priority setting process. We have 7 different policy committees out there. One includes transportation. And over the course of the spring of this year, we develop a series of priorities by policy committee. We build up an actual ballot, and every city in the state over the course of the summer has an opportunity to vote on what their top 5 priorities are. And that basically becomes the baseline or the framework for how we develop our priorities as an organization that carry us for the next 2 years before we get into 2026 and go through that same process again. So we're at the tail end of that effort right now. Our cities have got until the 27th of this month. And I probably should have checked before I got on here to see how many of you have got your ballots in, but I think actually the vast majority of you do. I think we're sitting at almost 110 cities right now. Typically we fall somewhere around 150. We'll probably hit that number. I'll just say in general, for transportation for us, it's going to definitely be within the top 3, top 4 priorities, at least as the preliminary numbers at this point in time. And I can get into more detail and stuff as we go a little bit further into Carly's presentation. So good to join everybody. And I'm sure we'll get a chance for some conversation here.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, at this point, I'll go ahead and share the slide. As I mentioned, we'll touch on the JPAC priorities. There, it's clicking over. The JPAC priorities, as well as, it's loading up on my end. The Joint Committee on Transportation Roadshow update. And then I also look forward to sharing some of the survey responses that the WCCC body participated in. And then again, turn it over to you all for discussion.
So it's Carly, we're seeing your preview screen, not the slides.
Oh, pardon me. There's always some sort of technical difficulty, isn't there? If that was better on your screen. I'm frozen on my end.
Ron, do you want me to try and share? This is Teresa.
That'd be great, Teresa.
We'll see if it kicks me out again. Hold on.
Apologies all. I am frozen on my end, so.
No problem. Let's try. There we go. Can everyone see it okay?
Great.
All right.
Thank you, Teresa. And if we can just click ahead to slide 3.
Sure.
Thank you. So I included this the last time that I met with you all. So this is just a touch on the JPAC priorities for the 2025 legislative package. The area of emphasis, there's nothing new there since the last time you saw this slide, but the timeline was updated. Previously, we had itemized that JPAC would vote on the priorities in November. However, when we provided the last update to the body in July, they did go ahead and approve the agenda. So we were able to move that up by 1 month from November to October. So that's always positive when the government relations team can get the priorities solidified so we can start to do the work early on. Next slide, please, Teresa. Quick update on the Joint Committee of Transportation Roadshow that's happening at the end of the month here in Hillsborough on Friday, September 27th. It has been announced that the location will be the Hillsborough Civic Center. I will share with you all that they are looking at specific rooms. However, that's not been publicly announced yet, but you can count on it being at the Hillsborough Civic Center. The approximate schedule will be a tour from 12 to 2. The locations of that are still being worked out, followed by a roundtable with invited participants from 2 to 4, and then public testimony from 5:30 to 7. I will share that I did put forward the names as the next slide will highlight, but I did put forward the names that everyone submitted from the survey. So thank you so much for that feedback. I was informed last week that the committee process for officially inviting roundtable participants is that those invites go out about a week before the actual event, which I know it's very difficult to just hold your Friday evening. However, I have been told that the committee will be sending out those email invites, hopefully by the end of this week. Our friends over in Clackamas County have their roadshow the Thursday before ours. So I'm in contact with our counterparts there just to hear from them how the planning is going on their end. But so far it's been very successful at these locations and stops. And as we'll dig into a little bit more, your team of staff here at Washington County and our local counterparts really want to make sure that the testimony and the conversation at the roundtable is very robust and really represents our collective priorities. And I'll just say that I'll continue to keep you all updated as the public information is released. Next slide, please, Teresa. So again, thank you for participating in the survey. Just wanted to highlight the names that were put forward by many participants and that these are the names that were officially submitted to the roundtable. I also will be transparent that I would encourage any of your staff to also put forward your name. So I'm happy to share the email contact for the committee staffer. So you can also go ahead and advocate for yourselves. But we feel really good about this group to represent our WCCC priorities. Next slide. Great. So this is the first slide that kind of reflects some of the feedback that you provided on the survey. Thank you again. Again, these were anonymous responses, so it was really just helpful to kind of get our arms around your thoughts. And I'm not going to go ahead and read all of these. You have the slides so you can look at them. But what I think we'll end up doing is turning this information into just some one-pagers that we can have throughout the day on the 27th. So everyone who's in attendance knows where our regional priorities are at. Next slide, please, Teresa. This was a really great one. Again, just very interesting information. Of course, the top priority of the body for the 2025 package is addressing issues that cause congestion. But we had some other very high priorities as well. Next slide, please. Again, just some feedback from the survey. You know, some interesting things. There is some support in the region for creating a retail delivery fee, but of course, you know, at the top, it's increasing gas tax, increasing the gas price, indexing the gas price to inflation and creating a road usage charge in terms of new funding mechanisms to support our transportation priorities. Next slide. And this is where I'll pause and maybe I'll turn to Jim and Jessica if either of them want to provide anything in addition to what I said. But other than that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Bubenek, after my colleagues jump in. Thank you so much.
I can go first if you'd like.
Hey, Jim.
So, yeah, so a couple of things maybe to highlight. It's a great overview of kind of where we're at. So I have only missed one of these roadshows in the last 2 months. So the last two are coming up here, obviously next week with both Happy Valley and Hillsborough. I think there's a couple of important pieces here. So for those of you who get the opportunity to participate in that 2 to 4 roundtable, that's where you're really going to have probably your most influence or direct opportunity to engage with the Joint Committee on Transportation members that attend. They may not be a full committee every single time, but they've actually had really good participation at every one of these sites. There's also likely going to be a Transportation Commission member or two as well. So I'll just say the format that they work from is they basically go clockwise and counterclockwise as they're just kind of trying to get input on responding to some key questions that range from what are your priorities as a city or an organization, but also funding. What are some of the things that you're looking at, interested in funding? You know, the one interesting thing, I'm just looking at the pie chart that Carly shared. Tolling, surprisingly, is incredibly, I don't know, has come up almost in every single roadshow and very supportive. And I think that's with the exception of the Portland area. So when you're in Coos Bay, when you're in Medford, Eastern Oregon and things of that nature, folks seem to think that tolling is a really great idea for the Portland area. I think primarily because it's not in their community. So I don't know where that piece is going to shake out, but that's become kind of a universal element as well. The other thing here for sure has been moving to some kind of a VMT, road user fee type of structure to replace gas tax. I mean, to try to stabilize those revenues. I think everybody understands around the table here that we're and have been in a decline on gas tax revenue. And it's not because we're driving less, or it's not because we're driving only a fewer cars. It has everything to do with really where the mileage is at this point in time. So that road user fee structure and VMT structure has the ability to also obviously capture electric vehicles and those high mileage hybrids and things of that nature. So when they originally proposed, we're trying to figure out how much money EVs needed to contribute. The idea was to try to come up with an equivalent within your registration fees. And for those of us, including myself, who have an EV, we've probably been paying into the system about a quarter to a third of what we probably should be with the comparable amount of mileage and things of that nature. So that's a piece too that I think is going to be important long term. I think the top line element on this is really going to come down to the formula. 50-30-20 is kind of bread and butter for every single city and every single county in the state. And there has been conversations, whispers, I'll just say, from some folks within the legislative body that may not need to be as important. And part of the reason they are looking at that is ODOT's operations and maintenance program is upside down. So they're running a deficit in the $300 million range. I think if you broke it down to actual operations and maintenance that would be relatable to, again, we'll say snow plowing, during the winter, it would be your core stuff that needs to be done on the state highway system. That number will come down because there's a bunch of other added pieces in there that I don't view as operations and maintenance. And I think others would be in the same case. But bottom line is you can't bond for operations and maintenance, right? So you can't take that penny that roughly creates about $20 million a year and bond it. So that's real dollars. And there's a significant chunk or a significant amount of pennies that needed to be added just to pay for operations and maintenance. So getting back to kind of the original point of this formula, that's going to be a major point of contention or conversation going into this next transportation cycle. And the more that we elevate the importance of that money coming into our local governments, the more successful we're going to be at, if I'll just say, effectively protecting it, or at least being in a better position had we not been. So that's one thing that, you know, certainly elevating would be helpful. I think just in general for the league, in terms of how we approach this, you know, our transportation package, again, was developed by our members. We're really focused in on a multimodal program. We want to make sure that the investments are going in not just for, we'll say, roads, road beds, bridges, and things of that nature, that core piece, but also getting into the bike ped programs, making sure that safety and congestion management is important. We want to make sure that those 2017 projects get completed. That too is going to be a point, I think, of contention, is how many of those remaining House Bill 2017 projects are going to get built. And that's ultimately going to come down to what the flavor is, or what that ultimate revenue generating amount is going to look like. So in 2017, we had a $5.4 billion transportation package going forward. That was pretty significant. And I don't know exactly what the scale of this is going to look like in the future or going into 25, but that is going to have a significant impact on how much of the 2017 package has yet to be built. So those are just a couple of elements from us. I mean, again, the public safety aspect for us in communities is huge. So great streets, safe routes to schools, small city allotment program has become really important, as well as all of the public transit investments that the state has made here since 2017. So that's at least a little snippet from LOC. The only other piece I think I can probably add is there will be work groups that are going to be probably in place, my guess, by October. They're probably going to have somewhere between 25 and 30 people around the table for each one of those work groups. And the Joint Committee is going to be making some selections on who's going to be represented at the table. So for anybody who went through the 2017 process, we were meeting in, I'll say, a similar type of work group. So you'd have one for, I'll say, public transit, which would include probably some of the other mobility elements that are out there, bike ped investments and things of that nature. You're going to have a work group specifically dealing with 2017 projects. And I think that's, again, going to be trying to rank the priorities that need to get built and try to figure out if there's anything that they're going to push off to the side. And then they haven't decided exactly what they're going to name the other one, but I think that's probably going to be the nuts and bolts of what this looks like going into the 25 sessions. So stay tuned for more information on that.
All right. So questions, comments for Carly and or Jim? Mayor Callaway.
So this has to do with the distribution of the gas tax. If the gas tax would be increased, would it still be subject to the 50-30-20, or, you know, like House Bill 2017, you know, there was some increase, but that was not subject to the 50-30-20. So I'm looking at being protective of the 50-30-20, which we have, as well as any additional 50-30-20 split that we might need be in line for if there's an increase in that. So I guess that's one thing. And then I still think, I'll just say it because, but eliminating the kicker would eliminate a whole lot of these problems.
No, thank you for the comments, Mayor. I think I'll just say in general, for all of the other elements that are important to the league and our cities and our members, we have to protect that distribution formula. We have 2/3 of the roads that are out there between cities and counties. Their constituent base is our constituent base. So folks who are driving on state highways are driving on city roads, they're driving on county roads. And I think it's very defensible to still be able to anchor that 50-30-20. I think some of the elements that may be helpful as we get into these conversations for 25 is, again, sorry, I'm going back in history, but when we went into the 2017 session, that package was actually $7.5 billion. And part of that reason is we had regional gas tax increases that were set in place as part of legislation for the metro region, as an example, to try to come up with additional funding from local sources and things of that nature. That was pushed out through negotiations, but I think going forward, every single county, I think, out there would love to have MSTIP as an example. That doesn't exist, I think, as everybody knows around this table, outside of yourself and Umatilla, if I'm not mistaken. Those are the two counties that were grandfathered into the system before Measure 5 and 50. So that may be a component of this, is to open up some revenue options for local governments to help leverage some of that state funding, because I think, as everybody realizes, our state transportation system isn't just one entity, it is an entire system, and a whole lot of different modes in terms of investments and stuff across the board. So hopefully that answers the question. I'm not going to certainly go into the session representing the league without that being a top priority for the formula.
Jeff.
Hey, Jim.
Hey there.
I suppose my question, having talked with our state representatives, I'm looking for your take on, right now we collect gas tax at the pump, right? And it moves back through the system that way. The concern I have is for those that can least afford any more taxes. And do you see any viability or hearing any viability on handling the VMT at the state income tax level? So it's the most efficient system we already have for collecting tax. Are you seeing any traction on that? That's what Susan McLean was talking to me about the possibility, because that way we talk about affordable housing and workforce housing. Those who can least afford any more taxes could be abated through a system that was managed at the state level through the state income tax. And you could say, hey, I started with this much mileage on January and I finished with that much mileage in December 31st. That means I owe this much. And you could withhold it just like anything else. So what do you think about that, Jim?
No, I think that's a great point. I think there are probably 50 different ways to deal with VMTs, whether or not it's something that's physically on your phone, something that you plug into let's say a cigarette lighter or a USB port, for newer vehicles and things of that nature. There are ways to track it to try to lessen the impact, or at least spread it out over time. I am not an IT person. I can barely turn my car on. So, it doesn't need an oil change. So that's a really good thing for me. But the technology definitely is out there. And I think that's part of what they're looking at. I think what we have received back in some of these roadshows is, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding with VMTs, is folks will look at themselves, I'll say on the east side, and think, well, they're going to be disproportionately impacted because they drive more. And you're already disproportionately impacted because you are collectively driving more miles than anybody else, because the whole point of a VMT or a road user fee structure is to replace the gas tax, not something on top of it, right? So the equivalency would effectively be there for anybody. The other thing that's kind of interesting, I think folks around the table here, because you're well informed on transportation, recognize that the average person who's driving, we'll say 11, 12,000 miles a year, is roughly paying only about $275 to maybe $325 a year in actual gas tax. By the time you add up registration fees, license fees, and things of that nature, that's not a whole lot of a tax burden in comparison to everything else that's out there that we all feed into the system. But I think that's going to be something they're going to take a serious look at on what type of options are available, because not a lot of people want to have something on the phone or something connected to the car. So I think there's other ways to deal with it.
Okay. Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one question related to Mayor Delane's comment. It's actually a two-part question. One is there any discussion of regionalization of a statewide road user fee or just a blanket state road user fee? And related to that, isn't a metro area tolling, isn't that the same thing as a road user fee? Essentially, I mean, from a standpoint, you're paying people to use drive certain miles. I mean, and is there do you have any comment on that?
Well, I think maybe a couple of things. Start with maybe the regionalization. So that has been a bit of a conversation. The technology certainly exists.
I think you're breaking up, Jim.
Yeah.
Tell you what, I'm gonna go off video and just hopefully that'll trim things up. Okay, let me start over. So from a technology standpoint, you have the ability to set up a VMT for a region, all right, whether it's a metro region or literally down to the city scale because of the technology that's out there. So it does exist. Now, whether or not they want to go there, don't know. But when you look at how a gas tax is structured in this state, it really is structured effectively is doing the same thing that gas tax does. It is all a surrogate or a vehicle to try to represent what an impact fee looks like on roads. Now, I suppose you can make the case that tolling somehow represents something similar because it does assess an impact on use of a bridge, as an example, or a roadway. But the VMT itself is I think is at least comparable certainly to the gas tax because again, it's a better surrogate for your actual impact on the road as opposed to having a different rate because of the higher mileage or mile per gallon type of vehicles that we have these days versus 20 or 30 years ago.
And just a quick follow-up. I'm assuming there would be no limitations on a vehicle, a VMT of some sort for operation and maintenance, or would that be limited like tolling is limited to a specific road section?
Right. So I think the concept, that's a good question as well. I think the basic concept here is you're trying to replace revenue going into the state highway fund. And I don't think folks have actually taken the next step here. Do you concentrate that revenue and where it's generated, or does it go into the statewide effectively bucket where it goes into that formula distribution? I think the vast majority of the conversation that I've ever been involved with in the last decade on this is once we make that shift, the whole point of making the shift is to replace gas tax revenue at the end and to make sure that that goes into that statewide bucket that then gets distributed out under the current distribution that we've got with 50-30-20 as an example.
Other questions for Jim and or Carly? So Jim, on the roundtable question, Carly mentioned that you don't find out till the week before if you've been invited to the roundtable. Given your experience, how big is the roundtable? How many folks are invited?
What they have been trying to do is keep that table to 30, 35 roughly.
Oh, okay.
Is kind of what they don't want to get it down to 10. They don't want to go to that end, but they also don't want to have 80 coming in. So what they have been doing, and this puts me in a difficult place, but they've asked LOC and AOC to basically try to help them out structurally with invites and things of that nature. And I haven't been sending out emails to everybody in the region say, hey, you want to come to this? Basically, the screens that we have been using and that the Joint Committee wants us to use it's more complicated up in Portland Metro because of the layers, right? Most of these regions where they meet, you just simply have one act, whether it's Region 4, Region 5 act, or what have you. And that's really what they focus in on. So it's a combination of elected officials that are on those acts, or in your case, an MPO and an act and JPAC, right? So you have those three different layers, and that's part of what they're trying to balance. But I think this time around, because Portland has already had and started off the road show, you've now got Happy Valley and you've got Hillsborough basically splitting up the metro region, at least from a regional basis. So I think the way they're going to approach this is focus on folks who are, represented on JPAC, on Region 1, on the MPO, East County, and then basically do the same thing on the west side of the metro region, and just try to get a good complement of elected officials. Will be business folks invited in this thing too. There's always folks in public transit. There's always kind of a bike ped component, and they've always done a pretty good job making sure that they've got labor represented at the table. And for some of these communities, the COGS, as an example, are part of that, have been part of that process in the past.
All right. And the public comment period, have people been showing up and well attended, good questions, good testimony so far?
Yeah, honestly, the testimony has been solid.
Okay.
This has really been actually a really pretty well done roadshow. Folks have really stuck to the focus of what's important to them. There's really not a whole lot of outliers out there or comments that the committee hasn't heard by now. I kind of mentioned on the front end of this, public transit has always been a big piece that was leading up to the 2017 packages, and why we have the payroll tax, because nobody was even thinking about a payroll tax to put $100 million plus into the system statewide. So I think being able to make the case in 2 minutes, which is what you'll get, gives you a chance to kind of concentrate your focus area. And I think they're being actually very sincere with taking the input. And I think most of these meetings have probably ended kind of in the 6:30, 6:45 range.
Okay, all right. So the folks that are selected for the roundtable, I'm assuming we'll get you mentioned a one pager or talking points in preparation for the meeting.
Yeah, and you can always submit that. So these are structured really not a heck of a lot different than what you're going to find in Salem. Okay. So because of the online system within OLIS, you've got the ability to submit comments in advance, as well as 24 hours, 48 hours after the actual hearing time. I think the other part here, and anybody who's part of LOC has heard me say this probably more times than you can count, is that grassroots involvement, the relationship work that you all do with your state elected officials is I can't give you a bar chart on what that looks like. I'll just say it's very high. It's very important to every policy decision, and it will be very important to this conversation over this transportation package, because the more of your state elected officials that you end up talking to in the region, or that share a Washington County boundary or share your own city type of boundary, that goes an incredible long way. What leadership is telling us right now, as an example, there's only going to be one tax vote in the 25 session, and that's the transportation package. And depending on what they do, they're going to need votes across the board, both caucuses, to be able to get this thing moved. They're not going to be able to do it unless something really crazy goes and happens in the election cycle with just one party. That's not the way this is going to work. They want this thing to be a bipartisan effort, and that's really kind of where their focus is going to be. The other piece, and I left this out, but I think it's still important. I think the state is literally reaching a point on many agencies that are fee dependent, whether it's ODOT, DEQ, Department of Forestry. I mean, you name them, and they're out there. There needs to be a serious look at some budgeting work, from my perspective, on how you start pulling some general fund money into this investment strategy, whether it's for transportation, whether it's for other types of infrastructure out there. And we're going to continue as an organization, make the case for some kind of general fund component in this. And the one from our perspective that makes the most sense, literally, is the operations and maintenance program. It's a statewide benefit, and it's a perfect application for some component of general fund. I know there's 50 other agencies and 50 other reasons why you want to allocate general fund money to something else. But again, I think from a budgeting standpoint, for many of these agencies that have been totally fee dependent, there needs to be some serious consideration for some general fund allocations in the future.
It was Chris Strickler and Representative McLean were in Tualatin a week or so ago for the transportation breakfast. And Chris mentioned how DMV is running at a loss of about $30 million a year, and they have to pull that money from general fund or other funds just because DMV doesn't pay for itself with the fees, because most of the money that you pay at DMV go for specific projects within ODOT, and it doesn't go to DMV itself, which is interesting that they're that they're running at a loss. That was an example of the $300 million gap.
Yeah, no, that's a component of it.
Right. So anything else for Jim or Carly? I appreciate you taking some time today, and I guess we'll see who gets picked, who gets the Willy Wonka golden ticket.
That's great. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. All right, that brings us to item 4C, which is me, the Metro Regional Waste Advisory Committee nomination. So what this is back in June of 24, Metro expanded the scope and membership of what the Regional Waste Advisory Committee, or the RWAC. They're trying and attempting to get more involvement from cities and counties in the process of their solid waste fee setting, which I'm very excited that we get this, hopefully one of us from the Washington County Coordinating Committee can sit at the table, interact with Metro, and let them know what we experience as cities, every year with this fees always going up, the tilt fees, everything we have to deal with Metro and the solid waste program, and be able to discuss it, get more into the details of it. So what they're doing is, as I mentioned, there's 5 seats now open on the RWAC for cities and counties. And they've asked us to pick a representative from the Washington County Coordinating Committee who can attend these meetings. What they're estimating right now, it's a 2-hour commitment per month. But the problem I have right now is that they haven't picked a date and time yet. So I just wanted to put it out there that once we find out the date and time for the monthly meetings, I'll just ask for nominations via email and we can vote on it, because this is kind of outside the scope of the Washington County Coordinating Committee in terms of, picking a membership for this RWAC committee. But as soon as we get to more details, I'll be in touch. I just wanted to get it out there and put it on your radar that if, the way Metro runs solid waste, if that irritates the heck out of you, that you might want to be on this committee and represent your fellows. Yeah, there's Jeff. I know Tim and a few of us are getting irritated at this, that you can represent your city and the other cities of Washington County when it comes to their operations, how efficient they are, how they plan for them, the budgeting, and the impact of rate increases upon your community members. So I see 2 hands up. It'll be Mayor Rosner followed by Mayor Beatty.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit more. You may remember they set up a rate policy review committee, kind of a short duration committee that myself was on, to really look at that process and set and advise the Metro Council on how they should look at that. And there was a lot of recommendations out of that, but one of them was cost of service based price or rate setting. And as a part of that, and where I'm hoping this committee is going is, and I've seen some language that is encouraging on this, is that not only are they going to be looking at what the fees are set at, but what's driving those fees? What are the rates that are driving those fees? And I think that's a really important conversation. I think it's great that they're willing to open this up and get us involved. I think it's a step in the right direction.
And just as a side point, Metro President Peterson had a meeting with Tim and I about this, and she is very excited to get cities involved on this because it does concern her. She's heard from all of us. she's as irritated as we are on some of these regional waste issues. So she is fully supportive of this. And in fact, she has said, if the 5 seats go quickly, she's open to expanding additional seats on the committee to get more feedback from cities and counties, in addition to the Metro staff and representatives from the industry. Mayor Beatty.
I guess maybe I'm less optimistic as you two, because the city of Beaverton is taking Metro on right now about the tipping fees and what it's doing. And there's probably a chance that my council votes against raising our rates and what that's going to do to us in the tipping fee. So we have a continuation of a public hearing tomorrow, because Beaverton's not getting, and just like you guys, but I'll speak from my perspective, we're not getting our fair share. There's no bulk recycling. They're not picking up hazardous waste, yet we continue to pay more and more to fortify resources that our city isn't getting. This is the trend with Washington County around transportation and garbage and anything else. So I intend to want to be one of those 5 people as a big city that's in this big impact. If she wants to, I already looked at the list and thought it was a small number of local government seats that are available. So if the 2 of you have her ear to expand the seats, we should push for it now.
Okay.
Because cities are like still not demonstrably represented on that list. I mean, it's a small voice, and I think the more of us we can pack on there, the better our chances are.
Okay, we'll do that. Councilor Rosenthal.
I just want to go on the record saying I'm fully supportive of Washington County cities and the fact that they have not been as well represented or served. And I support their strong voice on this committee to get more input and more regionalization of the services that we do provide.
All right. Stephen.
I did want to note, just for the benefit of the committee, and I don't know, Chair Bubenik, if you've seen a set of bylaws for the committee.
Not yet.
I was going to
Marta is still working. It's Marta McGuire at Metro. She's still working through the details. I guess she is not new to the committee, but she's totally revamping the committee on behest of President Peterson. So I think there's more to come. Like I said, they still don't have a date and time they're meeting yet. So
okay. Right. I did want to just make an observation that if you look at the other Metro committees, JPACT and Impact, there are a variety of representatives from different size cities even. And typically each county has a seat. So with only 5 local government representatives, you're clearly not going to hit that kind of a target. So,
right. But that we'll talk with that, because Lynn said straight out she's amenable to put more seats out there for us. Tim.
Yeah, I was just going to say we did bring that up with Lynn, because if all 3 counties got a seat, that's only 2 cities for the whole metro region. So she was open to that. And I would just add, for my schedule is swamped, but for whoever takes that on, I'm more than happy to sit down and do a brain dump of everything we learned in the rate setting policy process.
All right. Okay. So again, just as soon as I hear more, I'll let you know, and then we'll hopefully have a volunteer who can take this on, and we'll just send Mayor Beatty in there. She can get Mayor Beatty and Tim, maybe, who knows. We'll find some great people.
Happy to do it, but I feel like the fact on the representation across the 5 seats, if one goes to a county, we need to push early for cities. And I don't mind doing it as a full-time mayor. Like, just right now, that committee meets on Thursdays from 8:30 to 10 a.m.
Yeah. All right.
I was just gonna say, I support Mayor Beatty going in there and having them make us an offer that we can't refuse.
Oh, God.
Oh. Hey, one question that I'll ask all of you, because I'm not particularly supportive of it. Should the chair of this committee be chosen independently, or should it be chaired by Metro? My personal feeling is it should be chosen by the committee structure.
Committee choose.
Yeah, I guess that'd be part of their bylaws. Yeah, committee choose. Yeah,
which is more of an impact version than a JPAC version.
Okay,
that's my support. Anyway, just for the record.
Councilor Rosenthal, what would be your position? I'm sure the Metro councilors want to be on that committee. Would they be non-voting or voting?
I would think they would be non-voting.
Okay.
Because eventually whatever comes from before that committee and a recommendation comes to Metro Council anyhow.
Right.
That would be my take too.
Yeah.
All right. All right, that brings us to the JPAC agenda. Mayor Callaway and Commissioner Fye.
And I will take this this month. So I dropped my papers, so I apologize that I don't have everything in front of me. But a couple of the things, information and discussion items, we will have a presentation from TriMet on safety and security. We're going to go over JPAC legislative priorities, which should sound familiar from today's meeting, and then reviewing some of the 10 Step 1A project bond funds, which has projects from, all three counties. And so let's see, I think everything for, and TriMet, Metro has them. So this Hillsborough has one, and that is bringing forward on behalf of Beaverton, Washington County, and Hillsborough, which is the 185th Max Overcrossing Project. Clackamas County has Sunrise Gateway Corridor, Highway 212. So lots of money requests going forward for the next step.
Okay. MPAC agenda. Tim, what are you going to be talking about?
I think we covered this. We have one agenda item for the 26th, and where I think it's going is just MPAC recommending that Metro Council approve the Sherwood ask as Sherwood's described it. That's where I expect, just based on what the group's been talking about so far. Steve, you were in some of those meetings. Is that kind of what you're expecting? Yeah.
Okay. Mayor Lube, anything happening under Region 1 Act?
So this month is the month that we're off, and then we will meet again next month. So I have nothing to report.
All right. Do we have anything else to discuss today for the good of the order? We covered the whole agenda. Anyone have any miscellaneous topics? All right. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close this meeting, and thank you for attending today. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.